Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I will be doing a ranking of the 15 Star Wars young adult novels in the Star Wars canon. This is accompanying a couple of other videos I will be doing. I will be ranking all of the adult novels, which there's a lot of them, so that'll be a long video. And I'll be ranking some other Star Wars related book series as well, so check those out when they come out, which will be after this one. This is the first of them. And this one I will be talking about the 15 young adult novels released thus far for Star Wars in their canon. I want to preface this by saying this is just my list. So if I have books that I didn't like or loved a lot more than you did or anything in between, just note that's just my list. If you love them, that's wonderful. Every book should have fans, and I'm happy that many of these books do have fans. They just didn't work for me, some of them, and some of them really worked for me when they didn't work for other people. Secondly, I'll say that young adult fiction is still not a genre I'm most comfortable with. I'm trying to get into it more. I have several books on my TBRs for the next couple of months that are young adult so that I can get into them more, but I haven't read too much of them. That being said, I have read all of the Star Wars young adult novels in the canon, and it is a pretty even mix. I have 4 different categories I'll be going through today. My first category is the books that I didn't like, and there's 4. And then my second category is books that I thought were meh. They were okay, and there's 4 books in that one. Then we have my third category, which is I actually really liked these books. They were lots of fun. And then we have my fourth category, which is I loved these books. These were superb books. And I have, I believe, 4 books in that. Yes, 4 books in that category. So I am excited to get into all these. Let me know your ranking of specifically the young adult novels. I'll get to the adults books later in another video. But why don't I go ahead and start with my number 15. Bottom of the list is going to be Star Wars Midnight Horizon from the High Republic series by Daniel Jose Older. This is the one book that I didn't enjoy the plot, the characters, the writing style, or the atmosphere. I was not excited for this book, and it just had a lot going against it, which is why it's at the bottom. And it's very unfortunate because I enjoyed Daniel Jose Older's book Last Shot, which I thought was a superb book. It was not a favorite book of mine, but I thought it was a pretty good book. And I also enjoyed his middle grade book just fine, Race to Crash Point Tower, which was in the High Republic series. So I was very disappointed that I didn't like this one, but there was just so much going against it. The action was just not interesting. The plot, it was set on Corellia, and yet I didn't care about everything happening on Corellia, even though there were references to big Corellian things from the expanded universe. It was just frustrating to me. So there's another Corellia book that I like much better, and there are other High Republic books that I liked better than this. So this is my number 15. Getting into my number 14 is the book Queen's Hope. I felt that the Padme trilogy really went downhill the whole time. I thought, I'll get into my thoughts in the other books. This book, much like the other books, doesn't have much of a plot, but as I discussed in my review, it continues the concept of limiting your audience, and it also just didn't have enough added references, enough added connections, enough added context to make me interested in the series. And I didn't really care for the characters, and I don't like the way that Johnston writes a lot of traditional Star Wars characters. So that's why this is my number 14. My number 13 is another E.K. Johnston's book, Queen's Peril. This book has a lot of the same problems that Queen's Hope did, but I think it adds a little bit more context to Episode 1, which I really like. And so that's why I think it's just slightly better, in my opinion, than Queen's Hope. That being said, the factors of limiting your audience, the factors of having no plot, the factors of this book just jumping around, jumping to people that has nothing to do with, Anakin Skywalker should not be in this book, and yet he is. And some other characters just randomly pop up. It's very weird. And so... But it's a little bit better than Queen's Hope, I will say that. It has one scene that is just gross and weird that they would include it, but yeah, so And then the final of this category of the I didn't really like it was Out of the Shadows. I actually thought the plot was okay. I just didn't like her writing style. The characters seemed inconsistent in this book compared to where they were in other books, and also the universe was not expanded properly here. The biggest problem with these YA books, particularly the High Republic ones, is just the writing style is not particularly engaging for me, like the adult novels are, or even the middle grade novels are. It's not that I just think it's too childish, because the middle grade is meant for younger audiences, and I still love those. And I thought that Justina Ireland's middle grade novels, A Test of Courage, was a lot better, but I thought that her middle grade novel, I'm blanking on it, but I'll include the picture here. I thought that book was just superb. I thought that was an amazing book, so I know Justina Ireland can write good books. And so this is no knock against her personally, I just didn't care for this one. But now we've moved away from the I didn't like these books, and we're moving into the meh category. Books that parts of them are good. I really don't dislike big portions of these books. I just don't love any portions of these books. And so my number, what number am I at? My number 11 is Queen's Shadow. Went from Out of the Shadows to Queen's Shadow. Interesting terminology there. And this book I thought was the best of the Padme trilogy when it came out. This book actually has some plot, which is unique for a E.K. Johnston book. And I thought that Padme was written fine, I thought that Bail Organa was written fine, and that Rush Clovis was written fine, which is why it gets into the meh category. The problem is I didn't love the plot. I love politics, reading politics in Star Wars. James Luceno does a great job with it. Claudia Gray does a great job with it. And I'll discuss Claudia Gray later on in the video. And yet, just the politics didn't work for me here. And it also suffers from some of the other characterizations of some of the minor characters that just didn't entirely feel right. But I still thought it was an okay book. I gave it a really high rating when it came out, and I wish I hadn't. It's soured for me a little, but it's not a bad book. So now we're getting into my number 10, which is the last of the High Republic YA books, which is Into the Dark. This was part of the first batch of books released for the High Republic, and I read it, and I thought, that was fine, that was good, let's see the next one. It hit number 1 on the New York Times list, which was pretty impressive. And it really set the blueprint, I think, for the others. I just think that the others didn't handle the blueprint as well. I think that this book, as the other meh books in my discussion, are mostly just forgettable. This plot doesn't stand out to me. Claudia Gray is known for writing excellent romantic relationships, and yet there's barely any in this book, and I thought it was pretty weak what was little there. And so I just feel meh about this one. But the next book on my list was a book called Poe Dameron, Free Fall, which was super fun to read. And then afterwards I was like, what exactly happened in it? The basic premise of the book is that Poe Dameron goes and starts working with Zori Bliss, and then he leaves her organization when he sees things that they're doing, and it creates a fallout between them. Basically the plot of the book. This one has tons of references and fixes plot holes and fixes issues in the canon that I really like to see my books do, and so that's why it's a little bit higher. I actually really thought that Alex Segura got the character of Poe Dameron really well, so I thought that was very good. I also thought that he got Zori Bliss right, and he got the tone of both YA and the and Star Wars well. My problem is it wasn't stellar. If I had to say, I want to go reread a Star Wars YA book, it just wouldn't be this. I just felt, okay, I read it, it's good, let's move on. I have virtually the same feeling with the book Star Wars Padawan, which I just recently reviewed on the channel about a month or two ago. This is a recent release by Kirsten White. This is the number 8 on my list. This is rounding out the meh category. I thought this was lots of fun. It's Obi-Wan and the Lost Boys, which I believe I was the first reviewer to say that, but other book reviewers on Goodreads and Amazon have said that as well. So lots of people had the same idea there. I thought that this book really was able to get Star Wars adventures well. This felt like a a part of a Star Wars adventure, the fact that it wasn't part of an ongoing series is what hindered it, because it just felt like we're getting this big standalone book. Didn't add too much. It just felt like a solid adventure. Qui-Gon is very little in this book, which is why it doesn't work as well as, say, Master and Apprentice. And also Obi-Wan, she gets him right, which I'm very happy with, but you could have swapped out Obi-Wan for another original character, and I think that would have been better, because it wouldn't have stepped on any toes. It would not have you wouldn't have had people saying, that doesn't sound like my Obi-Wan. If you just make an original character, oh, that's a cool new original character. That was lots of fun. And however you want to write them is however you want to write them, because they're your character. So this one just suffered from, it shouldn't have been an Obi-Wan story. It's Obi-Wan because it was marketed well. And this is a book where it also hit #1 on the New York Times list, but it dropped completely off the list its second week, which is not good. That means that a lot of stores bought it the first week, and then they did not buy as much the second week, which means people probably weren't buying it in droves like they'd expect. So this book rounds out the meh. But I'm excited because now we're getting into my top 7, which means we're getting into my I either love them or I absolutely love them. So let's start with my number 7, which is Force Collector by Kevin Shinnick. I wish they would let Kevin Shinnick write more, because he just has a fun tone. He's just having so much fun getting to do things in the Star Wars universe. This book has so much to offer. It has explorations of the Force. It has explorations of the pre-The Force Awakens era. It has explorations of just being a Jedi. And it tells a type of story where the main character is using the Force to look back on Star Wars, things that have happened in the past, and it's like reliving them. This is the type of story that Episode 9 should have been, where you are kind of having an end game, going back to previous major events and seeing how they relate to the present. And so it has some really cool concepts explored in it. It uses all original characters, really. There are lots of references to big things happening, but it's not inundated with them. And it was a unique marketing strategy, how they tied this to The Rise of Skywalker, even though it had nothing to do with The Rise of Skywalker, really, which was just kind of funny to me. But still, it was a highly enjoyable book, and I really had fun with this one. So that's why this is my number 7. Getting into my number 6 is a book that I have seen. I have seen people love this book. I've seen people hate this book, and I was softer on it when it came out, and I've really thought about it more, and I thought this is actually a really good book, and that is Most Wanted by Ray Carson. I haven't loved everything Ray Carson's done, but I think she's just a solid Star Wars writer. She's not in the top tier, but she's not in the bottom tier. She's a solid writer, and this book ties into Solo, which is one of my favorite Star Wars movies, and it really ties in well. This does exactly what a prequel should do. It explains a lot of the backstory of the movie. It shows a lot of explaining Kira and Han's relationship. It shows where Corellia is. I really wish that this had released further in advance. Like, Last Shot was released about a couple months before, and it had loose ties to Solo, but not heavy ties. This book was released, I think, like a week or two after Solo, and it had all the ties. It was really a Solo prequel. And it did a good job of being a Solo prequel. And I think that had this book come out before Solo, people would have really attached themselves to the character of Kira, and so they would have liked her more in the movie. I just like Kira because, man, I love anything Amelia Clark's in. She's just the best. But I really like how smart she is in this book, how creative. I like exploring how the Empire is on Corellia, but they're not really controlling everything, and so really gets up to the little gangs and stuff that's happening. And then seeing Han go into space for the first time is just a wonderful moment. So I really enjoyed reading this one, which is my number 6 on my list. Getting into my top 5, this is rounding out the I love category, and this book I will probably be strung up by my thumbs and beaten for putting it as low as I did, even though it's still in the top 5, is Lost Stars. I know, don't throw anything at the screen. I know. Everyone else loves this. This is the most common #1 book I've seen on other people's lists, not just for YA, but for Star Wars. When this book came out, you had Aftermath and you had Lost Stars, and all the attention, all of it, went to Aftermath, because Aftermath was doing some interesting things, and so Aftermath got some big hate mail. It got a little bit of love, but a lot of hate mail, and then Lost Stars went under the radar. And everyone who was reading it was just gushing about it. And for everyone from book reviewers and podcasters and YouTubers, it was just being gushed about. And yet it didn't have incredible sales when it came out. It didn't hit the New York Times list because I think people just didn't know it was coming out. I didn't even know it was coming out, and I read Aftermath pretty soon after it released. So it's just kind of funny that this book would be so much better than Aftermath and yet not have the same sales. But this book really launched the career of Claudia Gray. Lucasfilm smartly knew what they were doing, and they got her a bunch of book deals after this really quickly, particularly Bloodline. She got immediately afterwards. And this book, it tells the story of Thane and Ciena, some of the most engaging young adult characters in the canon, especially in the YA. This is a YA book where I really feel the story, which is really good. And I really liked the way that Claudia wrote them in and out of the Star Wars universe. It kind of has a similar feeling to the way iJedi ties into the Jedi Academy trilogy. This book ties into the original Star Wars trilogy, the whole trilogy. This launched a bunch of books that covered huge amounts in the timeline, and I don't like that. I like my books to be like 1 week in the timeline. That's my traditional liking. But some authors like to do big galaxy spanning, multiple years across their books, and this one really launched that in the canon at least, and it's really fun. The reason I don't have it in my top 4 is I don't like the way that she writes romance and other things connected to romance, we'll say. But I still was engaged with the characters, and I am one of those guys that still really wants a sequel to Lost Stars. And I think that if they did do a sequel, I think the sequel would hit the New York Times list because Claudia's been so successful, and also the fan base wants it. It's something that Kenobi, even though the show wasn't that amazing, at least was delivering on something that the fans wanted. A sequel to Lost Stars would be something that the fans want legitimately, and I think that that's warranted, even though it's not my favorite, but I still really enjoyed it. It's a really entertaining book, and it's a book that a lot of people recommend to people as their first novel just because of everything it does so well. So that's my number 5. Now we're into my upper echelons. I love these books. I love these books. And if you ask me, you want to reread some Star Wars YA books, I would give you this list because I had such fun with them. And so number 4 on my list is also one that will probably get me in trouble, is A Crash of Fate. I loved this, and nobody else is talking about it. This is exactly the romance story that I wanted in Star Wars. It's so cheesy. It's so cheesy, but I loved it. I thought that this was so entertaining. I thought that the way that Zoraida Cordova tied everything into the parks was really organic. She and Delilah Dawson were excellent choices. Delilah Dawson wrote Black Spire, which was an amazing book, and this one was also great, and they really tied into the parks well, while also telling an original story. This is not just a way to get you to go to the park. It's not just that. It's an entertaining romance YA. This feels like the most YA kind of, like if you had taken out the Star Wars elements and just kept it as a YA science fiction novel, this absolutely would work. And I think this would actually be really successful. Star Wars YA romances haven't always taken off in Star Wars, which is why you haven't seen too many of them here, but this one I think really works. And I'm excited that Zoraida Cordova, after several years, is finally getting another Star Wars novel this fall in the High Republic series, and it's an adult novel, which I love the adult novels, so I'm excited to see that happen. And, this one, where I didn't love all the romance in Lost Stars, I did love it here. because it was more cheesy, and I just this is one of those books that I read all in one sitting because you just curl up with it and it moves so fast. And it goes back and forth between the perspectives of the two main characters. So I thought it was a really good book. My number 3 is Rebel Rising. This is also a book where they finally gave Beth Revis, which this book debuted at number 2 on the Times list. It just barely missed that number 1 status. This book was it still flew under the radar despite how good it was. It came out months after Rogue One came out, but it really explained Jin's backstory. It explained Saw's backstory. It explained why she's so angry at Saw. It showed fighting against the Empire during this time period, and it also felt very YA. It is a dark book. There are dark things. It's probably the darkest YA book in the group, but it's so engaging, and the plot, when the plot, the characters, and the writing style all work together, you have an excellent YA novel. And this is when every element of it worked. She nailed everything I think that she needed to nail. I just think that my number 2 and number 1 were just much better overall. But this still nailed everything. This is still one that I fondly look back at. And as I'm recording this book comes out in 2 days. The book by this author, Princess and the Scoundrel, comes out in 2 days. But that book will have been out for like a month by the time this video comes out. So I'm really excited to read more from Beth Revis as well. My number 2 on my list is Leia, Princess of Alderaan. This is a book that tied into The Last Jedi and actually had it is a good example of having loose ties into the film, so it made sense why they did it, but it didn't have to be a tie into the movie. What this book does right is Holdo is great. Everyone's like, Jonathan, can you possibly want to write a Holdo novel? Whenever I talk with my friends, I pitch writing a Holdo and Ray Sloane cat and mouse novel. That's my pitch. I've been pitching that forever. And everyone's like, how can you possibly think that would be a good idea? Well, I think Leia, Princess of Alderaan, shows the character of Holdo as being an interesting Luna Lovegood in the Star Wars universe. And likewise, I think that this book is just the way it writes politics. I told you earlier, I like politics in Star Wars, but I thought that E.K. Johnston didn't do it amazing. Here, Claudia does politics excellently, and it's still YA. It doesn't get too up there in the political thinking. It has great action. The writing, there is one scene in this that I just reread. It is the scene at the dinner table when Tarkin comes in. Oh man, is that such a cleverly written scene. I thought it was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I thought the romance in this was fairly well done, although you knew it was doomed to start because it's Leia and you know where she's going to end up. But it's still a sweet little romance and makes you think, aw, if only she could have stayed with that guy. So it's a sweet, fun book to read, and everything was done well. The plot in this one is superb. The character development of Leia. This one was like, okay, like Claudia's the Leia author. I mean, she's also the Qui-Gon author now, but she's the Leia author because, man, she gets it here and gets it in Bloodline. So this book's my number 2. But getting into my number 1 is Ahsoka. So you saw that most of the books by E.K. Johnston, her Queen's Shadow trilogy, was all near the bottom of my list. But Ahsoka is my number 1 YA novel. So it shows that I still have faith that E.K. Johnston can write excellent Star Wars, because she wrote my favorite YA book. This is the first Star Wars novel that I read on opening day. I'd read many Star Wars novels previously, but I had never gone out opening day and just read through a book. That had never happened. And this started my trend of following books in their release dates so that I could keep up with everything and read it the first day and get my review out there and all that stuff. And I loved this book. I thought that even though it actually doesn't have that much plot, when I reread this, the atmosphere was brilliant. It felt like an Ahsoka novel. It felt like if Dave Filoni had written an Ahsoka novel, that this would have been really close to being it. A lot of the little details about Ahsoka and Maul, which are in the flashbacks of this book, a lot of that is contradicted in the Clone Wars show, but the spirit of them, I think, is still very much present. Likewise, I think that everything in this book was kind of going in a direction that Filoni wanted to go, particularly with the Martez sisters arc, which I know a lot of people didn't like, and I didn't care for that arc either, but I think it's done better here. It's essentially the same arc, just with details changed, but the same two sisters who are meet Ahsoka and are affected by her, and I thought that this book really showed Ahsoka as a character and showed the dread of a Jedi being alone. If you liked John Jackson Miller books like Kenobi and A New Dawn, I think you'll like this book because it touches on the same themes that those books touch on. It was a #1 bestseller, and boy did this book sell a lot of copies. It helps when E.K. Johnston did a good job, and when they were able to get Ashley Eckstein to do the audiobook. That really helped them out. But I had so much fun reading this book. It's such a quick read, it's such an easy read, and it just nails absolutely everything. And this is one of the rare exceptions where you don't need much plot to tell a good story. Most of the other books that I loved, they had excellent plots, but this one, it doesn't have that much plot, and yet it's still an excellent Star Wars book. And I will always look fondly on this book, and this is proof that I can dislike an author's individual book, but still really like another book of theirs. So I'm always willing to give authors another chance. So that is my ranking of the 15 Star Wars young adult novels. I am sure I made someone disappointed in my list. If you have a different list, let me know down in the comments. If you're shocked by anything, let me know that too. And if you have other types of ranking lists that you want to see me do, let me know in the comments. Please subscribe to the channel. I have lots of Star Wars videos. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.